the silent empress. Behind a thin silk curtain sat a power so absolute, it could end a lineage with a single nod. History books remember Justinian as the great emperor of Byzantium, the conqueror, the lawgiver, the man who rebuilt an empire. But the people who lived inside that empire knew something different. They knew that behind every decree Justinian ever signed, behind every war he ever declared, behind every senator he ever silenced, there was a woman. A woman who started life as the daughter of a bear trainer in a circus, who danced and performed for crowds who threw coins at her feet. A woman the Roman Senate mocked, that the church tried to bury, that aristocrats sneered at. A woman who, by the end of her life, had outlasted every single one of them. Today we are peeling back the gilded facade of the imperial court to expose a strategic genius who mastered the art of invisible influence. This is the autopsy of a reign built on blood, silence, and the deadliest shadow play in history. The origin, from the arena to the palace. To understand how Theodora seized power, you need to understand where she came from, because nothing about her rise should have been possible. She was born around 500 AD in Constantinople, the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, what we now call Byzantium. Her father, Acacius, worked as a bear trainer for the Hippodrome, the giant circus stadium at the heart of the city. When he died, her mother pushed her daughters onto the stage just to survive. Theodora became a mime, a dancer, an actress, and in Byzantine society, that was one of the lowest rungs a woman could occupy. Actresses were legally barred from marrying men of high rank. They were considered morally corrupt by law. But Theodora was not just surviving. She was watching. She was learning. Contemporary accounts, even hostile ones, describe her as razor-sharp, quick-witted, and possessing a kind of magnetic authority that made people stop and listen. In her early 20s, she traveled to North Africa with a government official. That relationship fell apart. She was abandoned in Alexandria with no money and no status. But something happened in Alexandria that historians still debate. She came back different. She returned to Constantinople composed, focused, and within a few years had caught the attention of the most powerful bachelor in the empire, Justinian, the heir to the Byzantine throne. Justinian was captivated. Not just romantically, intellectually. He reportedly said she was the only person who could keep up with him. There was just one problem. Roman law forbade him from marrying her. Her past made her legally unmarriageable to a man of his rank. So Justinian did something that tells you everything about the dynamic between them. He changed the law. He lobbied his uncle, Emperor Justin I, to pass legislation specifically allowing reformed actresses to marry into the nobility. They married in 525 AD. When Justinian became emperor 2 years later, Theodora became empress of the most powerful state in the known world, and that is when the real game began. The Shadow Throne. How she actually wielded power. Here is what most history lessons skip. Theodora did not sit quietly beside Justinian and smile. She had her own court, her own ministers, her own diplomatic correspondence with foreign rulers. Ambassadors from Persia, from the Franks, from Ethiopia. They wrote to Theodora directly. Not as a formality, as the decision maker. She controlled appointments to the most senior positions in the empire. Historians have documented cases where men rose to become generals, prefects, and church patriarchs. Not because Justinian chose them, but because Theodora backed them. And the men she chose were loyal to her. Not to Justinian, to her. She built a network inside the palace that operated in parallel to the official government, a shadow administration. She also protected people no one else would protect. She created shelters for women rescued from forced prostitution. She passed legislation giving divorced women property rights they had never had before. She championed a branch of Christianity considered heretical by the official church, at enormous personal political risk. And she disagreed with Justinian. Openly, strategically. Historians believe the two of them sometimes deliberately took opposing sides in theological or political disputes. Not because they actually disagreed, but to ensure the empire maintained relationships with both factions simultaneously. They were playing both sides, together. This was not a woman operating from behind a curtain because she had no choice. This was a woman who understood that invisibility was a weapon, that the person writing the official history is rarely the person who made the actual decision. The crisis. The day. Theodora saved the empire, January 532 AD. Constantinople is on fire. A catastrophic riot, the Nika Revolt, had erupted from the Hippodrome. Two rival political gangs had merged their hatred and turned it on the emperor. Half the city was burning. The palace was surrounded. 30,000 people would die before it was over. Justinian was ready to flee. His advisors were ready to flee. Ships were being loaded at the harbor for the emperor's escape. Then Theodora stood up. What she said next has been recorded by the historian Procopius, the same man who privately despised her and wrote vicious slanders about her past. Even he had to record this.
My lords, the present occasion is too serious to allow me to follow the convention that a woman should not speak in a man's council. Those whose interests are threatened by extreme danger should think only of the wisest course of action, not of conventions. In my opinion, flight is not the right course, even if it brings safety. It is impossible for a person, having been born into this world, not to die. But for one who has reigned, it is intolerable to be an exile. May I never be deprived of this purple robe. May I never see the day when those who meet me do not call me Empress. If you wish to save yourself, my lord, there is no difficulty. We have money. There is the sea. There are the boats. But consider whether, when you reach safety, you will not regret that you did not choose death instead. For my part, I agree with the old saying, the purple is the noblest shroud.
The room went silent. And then Justinian, the emperor of Rome, sat back down. He sent his general Belisarius into the Hippodrome. The revolt was crushed. The empire survived. Because a woman who had once been told she had no place in a council room refused to leave the room. The legacy. What history tried to erase. Theodora died in 548 AD, likely from cancer. She was around 48 years old. Justinian was reportedly devastated. By several accounts, he never fully recovered from her loss. Some historians argue the second half of his reign, marked by failed campaigns and policy reversals, shows a man who had lost the person who kept him sharp. But here's the thing about Theodora's legacy. Almost everything we know about her comes from her enemies. Procopius, the main source for Byzantine history of this period, wrote two versions of reality. His official histories praised her. His secret document, the Anecdota, or Secret History, attacked her with accusations so extreme that modern historians treat it as character assassination rather than biography. The very fact that a man spent so much energy trying to destroy her reputation tells you something. You do not write that much hatred about someone who did not matter. Her image survived anyway. In Ravenna, Italy, the mosaics of San Vitale still stand. Theodora is depicted in full imperial regalia, crown, jewels, golden halo, equal to Justinian, equal to saints, preserved in tile for 15 centuries. No other woman in Roman history received that treatment. She was also the first ruler in Byzantine history to grant women the right to own property equally to men. The first to establish legal protections for women in cases of trafficking. The first to push for theological tolerance at a time when heresy meant death. A circus performer's daughter. A woman the law said had no place in power, who quietly rewrote the laws. Outro. What Theodora understood, what makes her so dangerous and so fascinating, is something most people in power never grasp. Fame is fragile. Thrones are temporary. The person holding the crown is the target. But the person who decides who holds the crown? That person is invisible. And invisible people are very hard to remove. Her silence was not weakness. Her silence was architecture. History remembers Justinian. But the empire he built, the laws that bore his name, the survival of Byzantium through its darkest crisis, The fingerprints on all of it belong to a woman history tried its best to forget.